On this episode of Clear the Air,
Early on, I did a Snapchat account, and I think I logged into it, created it, and I never went back on. I thought I was going to be a safety mechanism for my then teenage kids.
Well, I actually read a book about it that, and I'm trying to remember the name of the book, I'll figure it out, but it was about the people that started Snapchat and how they actually used and worked with a professor of psychology deliberately to make it addictive.
It now became a babysitter. I've watched parents just, set their kids with something in front of them and say, hey, do this while I'm doing the dishes or while we're at this.
Hello, welcome to Clear the Air podcast with Nathan Jones, that's me, and Joel Melton.
Hey, everybody.
Who is my co-host today. So a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, came out with his recommendation that we go ahead and put social media or warning labels on social media platforms, which is something I agree with. I don't know how effective they would be, but it is something. And this is probably the first thing out of Vivek Murthy's mouth that I've agreed with since he's been Surgeon General. So anyways, what do you think about that, Joel?
Well, I think that it's a start. Certainly I saw that coming out. I think it's a start, but I think the problem is that they'll just continually get used to it. And so there's nothing after 3 or 4 times they're going to swipe through it or however they have to get past it to go. And so it's should be the start of maybe more things to come if they're really looking to provide protection.
Okay. Well, I think if I'm right, I think his recommendation came out to do this was a while ago, a year ago, maybe more, and nothing's ever been done. I mean, that sounds kind of like par for the course when it comes to public health. And being the Surgeon General in the U.S., I mean, he is the head of our public health agencies because that's who heads up our public health service. But it sounds typical and par for the course that they say something and then don't do anything for 25 years.
Well, so I think that's the thing. So on the back of my ATV at home, I have a symbol that says you can't double ride on the seat, right? And so it has a symbol with a line through it saying no second rider. But I remember when we were out riding, one of the officers pulled us over and said, you're okay to do this because the industry doesn't match the regulations. Meaning that the ATV said no second rider on the back of the seat. It was just the bike style of the ATV. So you can't have a second rider back there. They put that there to protect them. But the laws didn't prohibit that. So I could put a second rider back there as long as they had a helmet on. And
wait, when you say a ATV, are you talking like a motorbike or like a four-wheeler?
A quad, a four-wheeler. On the seat, there's an actual symbol that says no second rider on it.
Do you know how many times I've been pulled over on the lake for having 8 people on a Sea-Doo?
No.
Never.
No, well, this was where there was a ranger riding around in the area, and he wanted to just check and do everything, make sure we had registration, and he made the point of telling me that the law doesn't require you to not have a second person, but the industry, the ATV industry, has put that symbol on there. I fear that this may be something like that where...
So, hang on, I just want to go back to this because that's bizarre to me. You brought that up and said, I'm sorry I have someone else on the back?
No. I had to get off because my registration was underneath the seat. Okay. And I had someone behind me. They had a helmet on and everything was legal, and the ranger thought it was important to tell us, you're okay, as sometimes they do, over-explaining. You're okay to have 2 people on there, even though your symbol right there says don't have a second rider on there. Okay. Because the law doesn't match it.
So you were all nervous and sweating bullets thinking he was going to write you a ticket. And, you were trying to cover it up, and he was trying to ease your fears.
That's right.
And so he said, no, you don't have to worry. You can ride with 2 people. I mean, you can put 6 or 7 as long as they have helmets on.
As long as they have helmets, yes. Yes.
Okay.
That was exactly it. And he pulled someone else over because they had a kid right in front of them, and they can't do that. They can't obstruct. So the adult was driving, and they had a little tiny kid in front of them with a helmet, but it was a bicycle helmet. Anyway, enough of that. But my point is, does this get to that point? So the industry is telling us this, but does the law match it, or is there enough else behind it to protect? So why is the ATV industry saying don't put extra people on here, but the law doesn't actually match that?
Yeah.
Well, is that a far way around?
Yeah, that is a very far way around.
It's because you started adding your point about the 8 people on the Sea-Doo.
Well, yeah, I've never ridden 8 people on a Sea-Doo, but I have had rangers pull me over for having 3 people on a 2-person Sea-Doo. And so there's anyways, that's neither here nor there. I think that they should put warning labels on social media. I don't really do a lot on social media because I've seen the addictive nature of it a long time ago. I actually read a book about it and I'm trying to remember the name of the book, I'll figure it out, but it was about the people that started Snapchat and how they actually used and worked with a professor of psychology deliberately to make it addictive, to make it so that people would come back and come back and come back and come back to the platform because that's where they make their money. And so I've never had Snapchat. I do have some of the social media platforms, but as people here at the company know, I don't really do much. In fact, I don't even know my password to get onto it. I know you guys have wanted to update some of this stuff on my social media platforms, and you've asked me for the passwords, and at some point I've got to figure out what those passwords are. So anyways.
Yeah, I did, early on I did a Snapchat account, and I think I logged into it, created it, and I never went back on. I thought I was going to be a safety mechanism for my then teenage kids. I thought I was going to be able to see what they were doing and everything. It just was boring to me. To be able to have to do something every day or do it, I just didn't find a lot of use for it. So similarly, I've got to log in somewhere, but it's just sitting there. I've never logged in again. I don't have the app on my phone or anything.
So is social media a big part of your kids? Like, were they out doing TikTok dances and?
So TikTok, I think just because of the nature of it and maybe some of the things we had heard, that was the last thing. I think now most of them are adults and they can choose for themselves. But as teenagers, we didn't allow them TikTok. It was, Facebook, and then that started to turn into this adult geriatric app, and so they really wanted to get into.
Wait, TikTok is a geriatric app now?
Facebook.
Oh.
TikTok is still there, and as they become adults, they can choose what they want. But as kids, we didn't allow them to do TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Because there was, the propensity for things, quick videos and stuff, and it didn't seem as guarded.
So let's get into what the Surgeon General says, and I'm going to read some of this because I want to make sure that I get it done right. So if I look like I'm reading, I'm reading. It says that the current body of evidence indicates that while social media may have benefits for some children and adolescents, there are ample indicators that social media can also have a profound risk of harm to the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. And I actually see this not in my own kids, and I'm probably going to get a lot of my siblings that are going to come back and start punching me. But I see this in a lot of my nieces and nephews that have, I don't want to call them mental issues because but they're having some social anxiety issues, and they spend a lot of time on social media. They spend a lot of time absorbed in their phone to the point where, I take my nieces and nephews on trips with me sometimes, and now I've recently, in the last 2 weeks, made a ban that anytime any of these kids or young adults travel with me, they are going to be leaving their phones behind because I don't want to have them go to some nice foreign place or, some place where I want them interacting with their cousins and have them all day.
Well, I think that's just it. So the social media aspect of it, because it's interactive, perpetuates that mindset in anyone, especially in adolescents, as they're growing and learning that. And there's plenty of other dangers aside from the social media, right? We talk about the blue light coming from the screens. If they're there all the time, who knows what neck problems we're going to have in 10 or 15 or 20 years. My youngest child is now 17, and he has never not known. He was born a year before the Apple iPhone. And so he hasn't known anything but interactive phones. And that's all he has. And we didn't let him have it as a young kid. I think he was 12 when he got his first phone, and we tried to limit it. And
12? I at least made Sophia hold out till 13.
I should have waited another year. I can see some of the benefits of that. But he doesn't know anything different. And so everything is, it's just interesting how that's happened. And I think progress is great. I think that, we're moving and we're using technology. But some of these things are really, we don't know the effects of it. We don't know what will happen in the future of this, whether it's the effects of watching it, the effects of doing it, or the addiction of that. But also, as you mentioned, in some of your family members, and you see it all around, that they're hiding behind that, so to speak.
I think it becomes an malaise I had my daughter invited a bunch of friends over yesterday, and one of her friends has a twin brother. And I said, and, when she would come over and hang out and play with my daughter, I'd be like, so what's your brother doing today? Oh, he's at home. What's he doing? Playing video games. I'm like, really? So I had him invite him over to go swimming with him the other day. And, when he was there, I said, so when you're at home, what do you do? I said, did you play video games a lot? And he goes, no. I said, what do you do? And he goes, I watch videos. I'm like, what kind of videos? Oh, I just watch Instagram and TikTok all day. And I said, you just sit on the sofa and watch TikTok? And he goes, yeah. This is a 12-year-old kid.
Well, and I think that's the danger, is because they feel like that's erasing boredom. All it's doing is masking it. They're still sitting there and not growing or doing anything. And there's benefits of it, and we'll get into that a little bit of social media, but I think it's masking that.
I think people, when I was a kid and I told I'd go into my mom and dad and I lived on it wasn't a farm. I mean, my dad's a doctor in a small town, but we lived on a house in the middle of 100 acres. And as I look back, and I think, maybe there's supposed to be an episode on my growing up with my dad being a small town country doctor. But we lived in this house, and as a child, I thought I was just lived in the most deplorable circumstances, horrible upbringing, but I lived on a house in the middle of 100 acres, and we had ponds and rivers and fields. We had horses, and so I look back on it, and it was absolutely stunning. But every time I was bored, I'd go in and I'd be like, Mom, Dad, I'm bored. What can I go do? And they never told me to go look at TikTok. They actually, what they said is, you go figure that out, or we're going to put you to work weeding the garden.
Right.
And I would run out and find something to do. And it had never had anything to do with weeding the garden.
Yeah. Well, I think that was mine, too. If we were bored or we were being punished, my dad's go-to was go match the socks, right? And our dryer invariably ate socks. And it was tough growing up in the 70s because you had the striped tube socks. And you could never find a match to it because there was one missing. And we had as big a family as you, and it was always difficult.
No, you didn't. You were one less.
Okay. It didn't seem one less. I had a couple of siblings with dual personalities, so. No, so that's really the key here, is finding something to do to occupy. But I think there's a lot to be said about not just mentally occupying, but some of that physical occupying where you're actually doing something. So I remember getting in trouble all the time for making mud balls and putting them in the refrigerator and outside because we were going to have a war.
You had a refrigerator outside?
Well, it was in the garage. We had one in the garage. We had to store all the milk, I guess, that we had.
See, that tells you how different we were, because we had one refrigerator and it had a padlock on it.
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason it had a padlock is because we'd come in and try to get something to eat, and then my mom would come in and try to cook dinner. She's like, what? Where did all the food go? What am I supposed to make for dinner?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, as you were walking away with a bologna sandwich.
Yeah, but we
ate all the cheese.
Yeah, we didn't have
bologna.
Yeah, we didn't grow up in the affluent part of.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, so going back to the whole thing, I agree that the government needs to do something about social media. I don't know that I think that putting a warning label on it is the biggest and best and bright thing. I think you need to have a multi-pronged approach to it. And I think that the Surgeon General should actually come in and start working and doing stuff and educating parents, and especially young parents who grew up with this, because young parents don't know any better because they grew up with it. But they need to start doing something with it and somehow put regulations and stuff in there. They can't have the traits that make them addictive, because there's no difference in my mind in having a company go out and make an addictive app, an app that is designed to make you addictive, than there is in a drug dealer selling you drugs that they know are addictive.
Yeah.
It's absurd to think it's different.
Well, I think that's it, because we had so long in video games that were before social media were really the craze, and they were designed to be addictive because you would die and be able to live again in your video game. And so that's kind of what happens here, but it's even more integrated into their lifestyle, where I've watched people open their phone if they're standing somewhere in a meeting or whatever, and they flip through a bunch of things and they shut it off, and it was almost just feeding this addiction. They just had to see something, they had to get it, and then they turned it off and were able to focus again. And so they're turning to that.
I left my phone upstairs.
That's really the point here, is maybe balancing that so that they're not creating or not allowed to create something that is so hyper addictive with the logarithms and how they're doing that, because we all see it. If you've done anything, whether it's you're full into social media or not, it's going to follow you, and you're going to see more content that's very like what you looked at one time, and you actually need to go in and try to eliminate that if you don't want to keep on seeing those things, or they're not good for you.
Yeah. So how do we get our public health agencies to do that?
Well, I think some sort of collaboration with a technology company that develops filters that provides to them. Again, this is kind of a running theme with everything that's health related. We're looking to spend money on correcting the problem when it's visible instead of working for prevention. I think if there was some collaboration with technology that would limit their exposure, limit their ability to stay addicted to those things because of the content keeps on getting fed to them, and have that be a filter that parents can manage, and is easy. It's not complicated. It's not something and spend money at that in a prevention level. In addition, I mean, the warning label is great, but it's going to be like, the legal contract once you sign up for the app. You're just zipping through it and clicking agree. That's going to happen here. You're going to click agree and get through it after 3 or 4 times, and it'll be an annoyance, and someone will probably figure out how to make that disappear.
I don't think kids should be allowed to use social media until they're, 45, 50.
That's probably a good age.
Again, I mentioned this earlier that, my daughter that's 13, the only social media that I allow her to use, she may be going around my back and getting something in there, but I do get on her phone and look at it every now and then. But is Instagram, because her team posts their dances and their routines and stuff like that on there, that she goes on and does that. So
not to downplay what's happened, I think it's definitely a start, and definitely bringing it to the attention. And oftentimes, when social media and other things first came out, and the iPhones and all the equipment, it now became a babysitter. I'd watch parents just set their kids with something in front of them and say, "Hey, do this while I'm doing the dishes, or while we're at this," to keep the kids quiet. And I get that. I think I didn't have that when I was growing up, and it was we had 4 stations on the TV, and we didn't get 3 of them because we didn't have good enough rabbit ears. But I think that's the key now, is it's so accessible and it's so easy to deter them from whatever, and it will come. And I don't think that's bad, but it's a start, because there's so much integration of it into everyone's lives. Whether you say you don't use it, but it's going to affect, because your kids will grow up and have that potentially if they don't get addicted to it, whatever age. And I watched my kids, and we tried to limit what their use was, and they'll still get to choose it. There's there's always good things. So you think about the good things that social media can provide. It connects you with older friends. It connects you with people in their past. It puts you in groups that are like-minded, or people that think the same. There's positive, uplifting things. There's sites.
But what if I don't want to hang out with people from my past?
Then you be just like you and don't get on it. Don't load the apps.
That works.
Don't load the apps. They'll never find you. But I think there's a lot of good with it.
They keep finding me.
Somehow they do. Yeah. It might be because of this podcast. You're now out in the ethos.
I was on a podcast with Mike Adams, the health ranger, a couple months back, and it was actually I actually had a friend that I hadn't talked to in 8 or 9 years, but I used to dive with him, and he called me up, and he just, "What are you doing?" That was actually really funny. I had a good conversation with him, and he's doing well and living in Wyoming. That's interesting that now that I think about it, that, we both used to work out in the middle of the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean, and now I'm in a landlocked state of Utah, and he's in the landlocked state of Wyoming, and we're both enjoying life better.
Look at that. Well, it's probably because you don't use social media.
Yep.
So I agree. I think this is a start. I think this is certainly something that needs to be, if nothing else, this brings awareness to the issue for parents and children, and maybe more so for parents and adults in general, even if you're not a parent. I think that's really the key here is the awareness to this, because like anything, it will eventually rule and become an epidemic, if it hasn't already, and alter people's lives.
I think it's already become a pandemic because, it isn't just a problem here in the U.S., it's a problem worldwide. I think it's a bigger problem here in the U.S. because we don't have the governmental controls. I mean, I don't follow this that closely, but I do believe that TikTok, ByteDance, the logarithm that they use in other countries is different than the logarithm they use here in the U.S., and that in other countries like China, where their headquarters is, they're actually bringing up more uplifting, more positive messaging, whereas here in the U.S., it's mostly negative messaging and, messages that are going to get you riled up and pissed off and angry.
Well, and I hate to admit this because I'm in marketing and advertising, but I think that's what they want.
Well,
right?
It is what they want.
They want people to get on. They want to guarantee they're going to get on, or at least give them some sort of where they can repetitively do that so they can sell to advertisements, they can sell and do those things. And I think that's mixing, I guess we'll say the good and the bad because of that addictive nature, but also it can be used for good. It can get words out. We use it in clear and spry advertising, or at least our messaging, to try to get messages out of the good points of the products and what we do. But I think that that's part of the problem. So I think there's a fine balance here between any type of government overreach to individuals, but also things that they can help regulate for the health and safety of individuals. And I think there is a fine balance there, that if it is using an algorithm or monitoring the algorithm with these companies so that there can be some safety in it. And, we find this in other industries where there's levels. You can't tell if a phone, if someone gets on there and it asks for the date of birth, they'll dial it back to where the date is so they can be under the age, but they can still do that. That's happened all around. But if there's safety measures that allow what it is, and either you pay for a different service or you do something else that you want to allow different things. But if you limit that and put some safety measures in, however it is, collaboration with technology, those are some areas where I think we can start to see. But I'm concerned overall with the privacy, but still wanting to make sure it's safe for my kids, my grandkids, and future generations, because it's not going anywhere.
Unless we have an EMP.
Yep. That could wipe it all out.
Yep. We can only pray.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a lot more to talk about this on social media and the warning labels. I think it's, again, a good start here. But there's danger and there's good in both this, like many products. So I think we need to just be vigilant and watching and helping and being there and supporting opportunities where they can do that. But anything else to add?
No, in fact, I'm glad I had you on here with me because, as we've brought up over and over, I'm not a huge social media person. So this was a topic that I'm glad you were here to cover most of it. And maybe I should pay more attention to it, especially as my children are getting older, because I'm sure that they're going to want to start getting on social media. And at that point, I'm probably going to figure out a way to, get involved where I can, make sure that they don't get too crazy out there. Because, again, they're friends. I see their friends, and their friends are out there doing all kinds of crazy stuff on social media already.
Well, I think that's really a concern here. So everyone looks for validation to some extent, whether it's friends, whether it's groups. That's all that social media is about. And getting validated yourself, and even if you're a confident person, there's nothing wrong. And people are always constantly looking for how many likes they got, how many people commented, how great it was, and then if someone says something negative, how you can defend that. But I kind of agree with your approach here and wish I was more like that. backing off from it personally, but being aware of it so I can help and watch those who I may have responsibility for, namely my kids and future generations.
Okay.
Well, that does it for this episode, right?
Yeah. You did the most talking, so I'll let you wrap it up.
Well, good. So watch yourself, watch your kids, watch your grandkids, whatever it is. Social media does have benefits, but there also is some dangers like anything. I think it's just being aware of what can happen and what you want to make happen. And I'm glad that this is a start, and I think they need to continue and look for areas without hampering down our own privacy, our own rights, but also making it safe like many other things that they do. So anyway, that's a wrap for this episode of Clear the Air. Thank you.
This episode of Clear the Air was hosted by Nate Jones, co-hosted by Joel Melton, produced by David Monk, associate producer Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby. Research by Sabre Bills. Music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.